times he calls us his children. Last week, or the week before, he called us fishers of men. I'll make you fishers of men. And other times he calls us disciples. And these are just a few of the things that he calls us. Today, in the gospel, Jesus uses two interesting definitions or names. He calls us salt and light. Not sheep or children or fishers of men or disciples, but salt and light. And if we look a little bit before Matthew's Gospel 5:13, he just gets finished giving us the Beatitudes. Blessed are the poor in spirit, for the kingdom of God is theirs. He gives us all 8 Beatitudes. And then he gives us this. We are salt and we are light. Very interesting. In the last 2 weeks, we spoke about attitude. The attitude of the Beatitudes. Last week, Doreen spoke on the action that one must take with the Beatitudes and with the gospel. So action and attitude, those are the two things, almost like salt and light. We see the picture of a perfect disciple, one being salt and one being light. If you combine the two, and you'll see why. Jesus says, you are the salt of the earth, and you are the light of the world. This salt in ancient times, historically, was important because, unlike us, they did not have refrigerators, they did not have freezers like we do, and everything was salted to preserve it. It had to be, or they'd starve to death, literally, in times that were of famine. So this salt preserved the foods, the fish, the meat, and kept it from decay. It would be comparable to keeping it from sin. And this is our job for each other and for the world, to project that light out and to preserve everyone that we meet. We say at the end of the Mass sometimes, go and love everyone that you meet, even those that you don't particularly care for. And this is so important, to be salt and light. Salt in the Roman times, in the times of Jesus, was so important that they'd pay Roman soldiers with it. It was like gold, because they knew it was flavorful. If anyone had any bread that had no salt in it, salt-free bread or salt-free anything, it just lacks flavor. And just a little tiny pinch of salt can transform a whole loaf of bread. Trust me, I've made bread all my life, and every once in a while I forget to follow the recipe and forget the salt, and you can't do anything to that bread. It's horrible. But as Christians, we are asked to give that little pinch of salt to the world, that little bit of light to the world. So Jesus knew that the people he was talking to, the disciples, knew all about salt and its preserving qualities. This week, however, Michael and I yesterday went out to lunch with Father David and Deacon Chris, and we were walking up the hill, and it was so slippery that I had to actually take my shoes off and walk in my stocking feet, or I would have been dead because I had leather soles on. And we're coming up, the two of us are coming up the hill, and we could just barely walk because of the amount of ice that was there. And knowing that the gospel was salt and light, I was wondering if Jesus came to New England or was brought up in New England, if he would have probably used a parable of salt and light. Salt, over the last few weeks, you'll see it even on my floor, our floors in the kitchen, there's salt everywhere. Salt on the driveways, salt on the walkways, but this salt cracks the hardest of ice, the hardest of hearts. This salt does things, you can just throw it and you can hear it cracking down the sidewalk. Just a handful of it will crack the hardest ice, the hardest hearts. And with a little bit of light shining on it, the light does the rest. It breaks the hard things in our life. So, as I'm walking up the hill, I thought maybe Jesus would have probably used this analogy, this parable of the power of salt, of the power of light on hardened hearts as the roads are so hardened these last few weeks. So, salt and ice, that's what we're called to be as Christians. And Isaiah, if you look back at the first reading, says this: how do you become light? How do you become salt? He says, gives you a little recipe. Share your bread with the hungry. Shelter the oppressed and the homeless. Clothe the naked when you see them. And do not turn your back on your own. Then your light, then your salt will break forth like the dawn. And the added bonus he throws in, and your wounds shall quickly be healed. So if you do these things and you become salt and light to people by doing the good works of the Beatitudes and sharing your bread, sharing your home, clothing the naked, God gives us a promise that we will quickly be healed. So for us, Jesus did not say you can be or you have the potential to be. He said, you are. And in fact, we are light and salt. So take your saltiness and your light